When Rat was brought back to Obsidian Village, the first reaction of the guards at the south gate was to tie him up. Because the entire way back, he had acted far too much like someone who would run. In truth, if Shi Shang and Ma Yuan had not kept watch on him from the front and back, he would have tried to escape at least 3 times. When they finally entered through Obsidian Village's southern gate, Rat saw the wooden sign hanging at the entrance. Register your name first. Enter afterward. His expression turned strange. You people really make everyone register wherever you go. Zhou Mian said coldly, otherwise, you prefer sending people away to become numbers. Rat immediately shut his mouth. He was taken to a temporary questioning room outside the responsibility adjudication area of the Black Tide Purification Office. They did not interrogate him immediately. They registered his name first. Uncle Joe sat behind the table. He looked at Rat and asked, "Name?" Rat answered by reflex, "Rat." Uncle Joe raised his eyes. "Real name?" Rat scratched his head. "Everyone in the game calls me Rat." Uncle Joe did not urge him. He simply held the brush and waited. Rat felt uncomfortable under his stare. At last, he said in a low voice, "Luo Shu." Uncle Joe put brush to paper. Luo Shu. Alias Rat. Independent player intelligence broker. Intermediary for special escort recruitment. After the words were written, a faint trace of black chi floated up from Rat's body. Bai Ji frowned. He has also been marked by contamination. Rat's face changed. I didn't participate in the experiment. After checking him, Guan said, it is not experimental contamination. It is a transaction mark. He introduced people for Luo Wence's line or He Jin's line. A contact mark was left on him. Rat's expression became even uglier. They marked me too? Shen Luo sneered. What did you think you were, a partner? You were only a disposable intermediary. Rat's lips went white. That sentence was more effective than a threat. He had always thought he was only earning intermediary fees. As long as he did not get close to the core of the experiments, he could safely get away. Only now did he realize that Luo Wence had already hung a mark on him too. Once he was exposed, he might be erased just like R04. Lin Yao sat across from him. The list. Rat immediately handed over the oilcloth list. Uncle Zhou, Shen Luo, and Bai Ji organized it together. There were 13 names on the list. Zhou Mian, Huang Qi, A Luo, Chen Xiaoqi, Jiang Bai, Tian San, Mo Yenshan, Du Li, Gao Jun, Lan Yuan, Ma Liang, Han Qi, Song Yuan. After every name on the list, there was a brief note. Short of money. Wants to become stronger. Debt. Family medical treatment. Looking for a team. High synchronization constitution. Can be guided. The words were short. But they made the atmosphere in the room extremely heavy. Because every note represented an opening that had been exploited. When Zhou Mian saw the words family medical treatment after her own name, her face turned pale. It was as if, for the first time, she was seeing herself simplified into 4 words on someone else's account. Family medical treatment. All her urgency, fear, struggle, and the desperation that had forced her to sign were only those 4 words to Rat. Lin Yao looked at Rat. Who wrote these notes? Rat lowered his head. I did. Purpose? To make it easier to recommend people to different mission lines. Shen Luo added, in other words, weakness classification. Rat said quietly, an intermediary has to know what the client wants. Zhou Mian slammed the table. Am I a client? Rat jumped in fright and did not dare answer. Zhou Mian's eyes reddened. You said it was a mission. You said it was only high risk. You said the money would arrive. And in the end, on your list, I am just family medical treatment. Rat stammered, Sister Zhou, I. Lin Yao raised a hand and told Zhou Mian to sit for now. Zhou Mian, you may listen. But right now, we need to clarify the list. Zhou Mian took a deep breath and sat back down. She knew this was not the time to vent. Because the other 12 people on this list might still be inside the old salt road. Lin Yao questioned Rat one by one. Huang Qi owed debts to an underground gambling house. A Luo wanted to join a major guild, but had been rejected many times. Chen Xiaoqi worked odd jobs in reality and wanted to earn money quickly in the game. Jiang Bai had once been a scout for his squad. After his squad disbanded, he had drifted into the independent player camp. Tian San had an NPC mixed blood identity setting. He was often ordered around by players and wanted to obtain power. Mo Yenshan was suspected to have a high synchronization constitution, and Rat had specially marked him in red. Dooley was searching for her missing older brother. Gao Jun owed equipment loans. Lan Yuan was a healing-type player who had once come into contact with contaminated patients. Ma Liang was an escort player. Han Qi's real-life identity was unknown, and he spent generously. Song Yuan was quiet and reserved. Rat had written only 2 words beside his name, dangerous. When Shen Luo saw the last 2 people, he frowned. Han Qi and Song Yuan do not look like ordinary recruits. Rat immediately said, right. Han Qi came to me on his own. He seemed to know a lot of inside information. As for Song Yuan. Rat paused. Song Yuan didn't seem short of money, and he didn't seem to want to become stronger. He only asked me where he could meet Luo Wence. The room instantly fell silent. Lin Yao asked, is Song Yuan one of Luo Wence's people? Rat shook his head. I don't know. But I felt he was even more like a rat than me. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, the kind of person who burrows very deep. Shi Shang said, he may be a spy from another side. Xinwan had mentioned before that aside from the second research group and Luo Wence's remnant line, at least 2 outside forces had already observed the fluctuations of the new order. Song Yuan might be one of them. Or he might simply be a deeper level player. No matter what, the list was more complicated than expected. The 13 people were not simply 13 victims. There might be collaborators, spies, infiltrators, and even people actively seeking black tide power mixed among them. That sharply increased the difficulty of the rescue operation. Lin Yao divided the list into 4 categories. 1. Clearly guided targets, Zhou Mian, Huang Qi, Chen Xiaoqi, and Gao Jun. 2. Demand-driven high-risk targets, a Luo, Tian San, Dooley, Ma Liang, and Lan Yuan. 3. Suspected high synchronization or special targets, Mo Yenshan and Jiang Bai. 4. Unknown identity or suspected third party, Han Qi and Song Yuan. After Uncle Zhou recorded this, the transaction mark on Rat's body suddenly lit up. He screamed and collapsed to the floor. A line of black words surfaced on his chest. Intermediary leak. Erasure. Zhan and Fang Zhiyan rushed in at once. Fang Zhiyan's face was pale, but he spoke immediately. Luo Shu is not an erasure target. Rat convulsed all over. My name is Luo Shu. Zhan pressed down on his shoulder. Report your alias. Rat was in so much pain that tears came out. Rat. Shen Luo said coldly from the side, report your responsibility. Rat cried out, intermediary for special escort recruitment. Uncle Joe immediately added the notes. After Luo Shu leaked the list, an erasure mark was triggered. Source of erasure responsibility, Luo Wence's recruitment line. Luo Shu's own responsibility, intermediary inducement and concealment of risk. He has provided the list as remedial cooperation. After this section was written down, the black words on Rat's chest slowly faded. He lay limp on the ground, as if he had been fished out of water. This time, he was finally truly afraid. They really want to kill me. Zhou Mian said coldly, you believe it now? Rat did not argue. He only said in a trembling voice, I know one more thing. Lin Yao looked at him. Rat gasped a few times. Of the 13 people, 6 have already entered the underground section of the Old Salt Road. But the rest may not have entered yet. Lin Yao's gaze sharpened. Where are they? Tonight, Rat said. There will be a second group gathering on the outskirts of the Old Salt Road. The location is the abandoned Saltwell Yard. If you want to save them, there is still time. This information immediately changed the situation. The Old Salt Road operation did not have to begin by attacking the relay station. They could intercept the second group first. If they could stop people before they entered the underground section, they could prevent more of them from being turned into numbers. Lin Yao stood. Prepare to move. This time, the target was not the Old Salt Road relay station itself. It was the abandoned Saltwell Yard. First, intercept the people. Then, sever the line. The abandoned Saltwell Yard was southeast of the Old Salt Road relay station. It had once been one of the few places on the Black Stone wasteland that could produce salt. Later, the groundwater turned black, the salt wells became contaminated, and the entire area was abandoned. Players rarely went there. Because there were no good monsters there. No stable materials. And low-level contaminated mist often appeared. But for exactly that reason, it had become the most suitable place for a secret gathering. Lin Yao did not bring a large force. The goal of this operation was to intercept the second group of gathered recruits, not to launch an assault. The participants were reduced to 3 groups. The first group was Lin Yao, Zhao Tai, Su Feng, and Liang Ping. They were responsible for frontal contact and suppression if necessary. The second group was Shi Shang, Ma Yuan, and Zhou Mian. They were responsible for identifying the recruiters and the gathered targets. The third group was Bai Ji, Zhan, and Fang Zhiyan. They were responsible for on-site name settling and anti-erasure commands. Gao Mu remained in Obsidian Village. Shen Luo also stayed behind to continue investigating the list of 13 and the Old Salt Road logistics. Rat was kept in the adjudication area and was not allowed to leave. He had wanted to go with them, saying he could recognize people. But Lin Yao refused. The erasure mark on Rat's body had only just been suppressed. If they brought him to the front line, Luo Wence might directly use him as a positioning point. Under the night, the abandoned Saltwell Yard was deathly silent. The ground was covered in pale gray salt crust. When stepped on, it made a brittle, fragmented sound. Several abandoned wells were scattered at the center of the yard. Their openings were half covered by wooden planks, with tattered warning signs hanging around them. There was a bitter smell in the air. As soon as Zhou Mian arrived, her expression turned very poor. Bai Ji immediately asked, "Do you feel a reaction?" Zhou Mian nodded. "Before I went into the experiment, I also gathered at a place like this. They first make you sign a second agreement. The first one is for a high-risk mission. The second one is the one that really sends you in." Lin Yao asked, "Did you sign it?" Zhou Mian said quietly, "I did. At the time, they said that if I didn't sign, the first payment would have to be recovered. Zhao Tai said angrily, "Isn't that coercion?" Zhou Mian smiled bitterly. "They don't call it that." Fang Zhiyan said in a low voice, "They call it procedural correction." Everyone looked at him. Fang Zhiyan's face was pale. "I remember a little. The second research group often said things like that too." It was not coercion. It was procedural correction. It was not confinement. It was safety observation. It was not erasure. It was risk termination. With every sentence he spoke, his breathing grew heavier. Zhan quickly reminded him, "Report your name." Fang Zhiyan closed his eyes. Fang Zhiyan, son of Fang Yakan. Name-settling reciter, in training. He opened his eyes and steadied himself. Lin Yao wrote those phrases into the notes beside the current responsibility register. Alternative terminology commonly used by the second research group and Luo Wence's line: procedural correction, safety observation, risk termination. Note, this type of terminology may be used to weaken the subject's awareness of resistance. This was not a small matter. Language itself could become a contamination tool. Luo Wence understood this very well. That was why he valued Fang Zhiyan so much. Before midnight, a group appeared at the edge of the abandoned saltwell yard. 7 people in total. 5 of them looked like independent players. One gray-cloaked person was responsible for leading the way. There was also a person in an old merchant robe holding an agreement scroll. Zhou Mian hid behind a salt well. When she saw one of them, she whispered, "That is a Luo." Ma Yuan also recognized another. Gao Jun. Lin Yao quickly compared them against the list. A Luo, Gao Jun, Du Li, Ma Liang, and someone suspected to be Huang Qi. 5 people. In other words, this was very likely the second batch from the list of 13. The gray-cloaked person stopped beside an abandoned well. The merchant-robed person unfolded the agreement scroll. "Everyone, before entering the underground section of the old salt road, you must complete supplementary confirmation. This is normal procedure. You have already received an advance payment. If you withdraw now, you must return 3 times the amount as breach compensation." The faces of several players turned ugly. Gao Jun could not help saying, "You never mentioned that clause before." The merchant-robed person smiled. "It is written under item 7 of the main agreement. Please check it yourself." Gao Jun gritted his teeth. A Luo asked, "What exactly are we doing after we go in?" The merchant-robed person answered with practiced ease. "Synchronization pressure adaptation. There is risk, but the reward is very high. Those who succeed will obtain a special combat quota for the Old Salt Road, as well as subsequent faction recommendations." Dooley asked in a low voice, "Can you help me find someone?" The merchant-robed person smiled. "As long as you pass the test, we have the resources to help you find your brother." When Lin Yao heard this, his gaze turned cold. This was inducement. They targeted each person's opening and gave different promises. It was not coercion. But it was more insidious than coercion. Because it made people think they were choosing. The gray-cloaked player began to urge them. "Sign. Time is up." The merchant-robed person spread the scroll open. A line of very small words surfaced at the bottom of the scroll. The signer voluntarily assumes the consequences of synchronization pressure, contamination risk, memory deviation, and identity fluctuation. Lin Yao raised a hand. "Move." Shang was the first to rush out, directly cutting off the gray-cloaked person's retreat. Zhao Tai brought Liang Ping forward from the other side. Su Feng threw a name-settling talisman toward the scroll. Lin Yao stepped out of the shadow of the salt well. This agreement will not be signed. The merchant-robed person's expression changed. Obsidian Village? The independent players immediately panicked. A Luo drew a short blade. Are you trying to steal the mission? Zhou Mian walked out from behind them. A Luo, don't sign. A Luo froze when he saw her. Zhou Mian? Gao Jun also recognized her. Didn't you get that high-paying mission? Zhou Mian looked at them. I got a number. She pulled open her collar and revealed the B03 remnant mark on her chest that had not yet fully vanished. The faces of several people changed instantly. The merchant-robed person immediately shouted, "She is a failed sample. She has been contaminated by Obsidian Village." Fang Zhiyan stepped out. His voice was still a little hoarse, but it was clear. Contamination terminology. Failed sample is not a name. Her name is Zhou Mian. The merchant-robed person looked at Fang Zhiyan, and his face went white. B11? Fang Zhiyan's fingers trembled. Zhan immediately stood beside him. Fang Zhiyan took a deep breath. My name is Fang Zhiyan. Not B11. Language is not a contamination command. You are using an incorrect address to trigger residual numbering. After he said this, even Fang Zhiyan himself froze for a moment. Because he realized that he was not only being soothed. He could also identify the other side's terminology. The merchant-robed person's expression became completely ugly. The gray-cloaked player drew a blade. Recover the defecting sample. Zhao Tai laughed in fury. Try recovering one. Battle erupted instantly. The gray-cloaked player was not weak, but he was much worse than the R series. Zhao Tai and Liang Ping were enough to suppress him. Shi Shang kept his eyes on the merchant-robed person to prevent him from activating the scroll. The merchant-robed person gritted his teeth and tried to tear apart the agreement scroll. Lin Yao was faster. The contamination responsibility register opened. Supplementary agreement. Using advance payment, breach compensation, and procedural correction as names to induce high-risk synchronization assumption. Risk disclosure is printed too small, and the core consequences were not sufficiently explained. Ruling, inducement agreement. Light from the responsibility register fell onto the scroll. The tiny words at the bottom of the scroll rapidly enlarged, exposed before everyone's eyes. Contamination risk. Memory deviation. Identity fluctuation. Consequences borne by the signer. After a Luo, Gao Jun, Dooley, and the others saw clearly, all their faces changed. Ma Liang said angrily, "You didn't mention identity fluctuation at all." The merchant-robed person still wanted to argue. It is written in the agreement. Lin Yao said coldly, writing it does not mean explaining it clearly. Hiding it in the words does not equal disclosure. As soon as those words fell, gray-white flames ignited on the scroll. It was not being burned away. Instead, all the hidden terms were being illuminated. The merchant-robed person's face turned deathly pale. You cannot break the agreement. Shen Luo was not present, but if he had been, he would certainly have said that this kind of agreement feared exposure the most. The gray-cloaked player was kicked down by Zhao Tai. Shi Shang also restrained the merchant-robed person. The 5 independent players remained doubtful and unsettled. They did not know whether they should believe Obsidian Village. After all, from their perspective, Obsidian Village had suddenly appeared too, and it looked like another faction. Lin Yao did not demand that they join immediately. He only placed the temporary return to register order on the ground. You may choose. If you want to continue to the old Salt Road, I will not stop you. But before you make your decision, I will tell you about the situations of Zhou Mian, Fang Zhiyan, Xiong Jian, and R04. and I will tell you what this agreement truly says. Listen first. Then choose. The group was silent. In the end, Dooley was the first to walk toward the temporary return to register order. I want to hear. Gao Jun gritted his teeth and walked over too. I will hear it too. Luo hesitated for a very long time, then put away his short blade. Speak. The second batch of recruitment at the abandoned Saltwell yard was intercepted by Obsidian Village. But just as Lin Yao began to explain, a deep military horn suddenly sounded from the direction of the old Salt Road relay station in the distance. It was not the bone horn of the Black Tide false soldiers. Nor was it an ordinary player horn. The sound was more orderly and colder. It was like living people inhaling at the same time, then exhaling in order at the same time. Fang Zhiyan's face instantly turned deathly pale. Military command phrase. Lin Yao looked toward the relay station. Luo Wence's first batch of living Nameless army might already have begun to activate. Everyone in the abandoned Saltwell yard heard that military order. It was not merely sound. It was pressure. It felt as if someone had carved a command into the air, then forced anyone who heard it to breathe along. Luo and the other 5 independent players instantly went pale. Although they had not yet entered the underground section of the old Salt Road, they had already signed the first high-risk mission agreement. That agreement might have buried a preliminary mark in them long ago. As soon as the military order sounded, the marks on their bodies were pulled at the same time. Gao Jun clutched his head. What is happening? Dooley dropped to her knees, her eyes beginning to lose focus. Ma Liang's hand lifted uncontrollably, as if he were about to form ranks. Although the merchant-robed person was being held down by Shi Shang, he suddenly laughed. Too late. The first batch has already activated. It doesn't matter if you intercept the second batch. As long as the military order completes, all marked personnel afterward will be recalled. Lin Yao looked at Fang Zhiyan. Fang Zhiyan's face was pale, but he had already stepped forward on his own. This is not a complete military order. It is a gathering command. It is summoning marked personnel to move toward the relay station. Bai Ji asked, can you counter it? Fang Zhiyan's throat moved. He was afraid. Because this type of military command phrase was very similar to what he had heard when he was contaminated. It was only more mature than the B-series. If he opened his mouth to counter it, he might suffer backlash from the military order. Zhan stood beside him. You do not have to counter it alone. Fang Zhiyan looked at him. Zhan said, I will establish temporary names. You do the name-settling recitation. The Lord will suppress it with the register. Together. Fang Zhiyan took a deep breath. All right. Lin Yao immediately unfolded the temporary return to register order. All who have not signed the second agreement will enter temporary registration first. Luo was still hesitating. Zhao Tai roared directly, if you want to turn into a number, then keep standing there. Luo shuddered and immediately threw himself beside the temporary return to register order. Luo! Gao Jun also shouted, Gao Jun! Dooley's voice trembled. Dooley! Ma Liang and the one suspected to be Huang Qi also reported their names. Zhou Mian added from the side, say why you came. Gao Jun gritted his teeth. I owe equipment loans. Dooley cried as she said, I am looking for my brother. Luo said quietly, I wanted to enter a major guild. Ma Liang said, I only accepted an escort mission. Huang Qi's eyes were full of pain. I owe gambling debts. Lin Yao recorded them one by one. These reasons were not glorious. Some even carried fault. But they were real. Reality was better than being erased by military command into numbers. Fang Zhiyan stood before the temporary return to register order and began to recite. At first, his voice trembled a little. A Luo is not a recall unit. Gao Jun is not dead combat power. Dooley is not a family search inducement sample. Ma Liang is not an escort consumable. Huang Qi is not a gambling debt collateral body. Every sentence corresponded to an opening on one person's body. The military command phrase tried to summon them toward the old salt road. Fang Zhiyan used name-settling recitation to pull them out of the recall logic. Zhan coordinated faster and faster. Whenever someone's eyes became unfocused, he immediately established a temporary anchor. Dooley, stay here first and find your brother later. Do not go die now. Gao Jun, debts can be investigated. You cannot use your name as collateral. A Luo, you want to join a team. You do not want to be numbered. Zhou Mian joined in too. She said to the group, I went there. There were no major guild quotas inside. No safe tests. Only numbers. After you go in, someone will decide for you what counts as success and what counts as failure. Those who fail will not get their money refunded. They will be erased. By the end, her voice was trembling too. But she did not stop. Because she knew these 5 people were her former self. Only one step away. The military commands sounded again. This time, the sound was closer. In the direction of the old Salt Road relay station, a row of figures appeared faintly. They marched in formation. Their movements were orderly. They did not have the deathly stiffness of the black-tied false soldiers. Nor did they have the individual posture of ordinary players. They were still living people. But their steps had already been unified. Gray-black number plates hung on their chests. They were not B series. Nor R series. It was a new mark. L01. L02. L03. And more. The L series. Living military command carriers. Lin Yao's gaze darkened. The first batch of the living Nameless army had already taken shape. They did not attack immediately. They only stood in the distance beyond the abandoned saltwell yard and came to an orderly halt. Then they spoke at the same time. Marked personnel. Return to ranks. The voice was not black-tied whispering. It was the voice of living people. But every person's tone was exactly the same. A Luo and the others trembled again. The light of the temporary return to register order was pressed until it swayed. Fang Zhiyan's face went white, and blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. This was military order backlash. Zhan supported him. Can you still hold? Fang Zhiyan gritted his teeth. I can. Lin Yao raised the Obsidian flag shadow order. The 2 words on the flag shadow order lit up. Named. But this time, those across from them were not ordinary nameless soldiers. They were living military command carriers. The Obsidian flag shadow order's suppression was not as strong as before. Because those L series still carried the breath of living people. They could not simply be treated as black-tied false soldiers. Zhao Tai asked in a low voice, do we fight? Lin Yao did not answer immediately. If they fought, they might hurt people who could still be saved. If they did not fight, the L series would recall the marked people such as a Luo. This was what made Luo Wence troublesome. He had turned the battlefield into a mixed deadlock of rescue and combat. Just then, the merchant-robed person suddenly struggled and shouted, you cannot stop them. The L series has already accepted complete military orders. They entered voluntarily. Zhou Mian abruptly turned back. Voluntarily? The merchant-robed person laughed in a twisted way. Of course. Every one of them signed. Lin Yao opened the responsibility register. Having signed does not mean they cannot be saved. He looked toward the L series in the distance. Fang Zhiyan, can you make your voice reach them? Fang Zhiyan panted. Yes. But I do not know their names. Lin Yao looked at Zhou Mian and the list. Use the list first. He unfolded the list of 13 provided by Rat. The 6 known to have entered the underground section of the old Salt Road were very likely among the L series. Huang Qi, a Luo, and the other 5 had been intercepted. Among the remaining names, Jiang Bai, Mo Yenshan, Lan Yuan, Han Qi, Song Yuan, and the others might already have entered. Lin Yao called out loudly, Jiang Bai. Within the distant L series, one person's steps shook almost imperceptibly. It worked. Lin Yao continued to call, Mo Yenshan. Another person's head lifted a little. Lan Yuan. The number plate on the chest of a third L series flickered. Fang Zhiyan immediately followed with name-settling recitation. Jiang Bai is not an L number. Mo Yenshan is not a military command carrier. Lan Yuan is not a living sample. The L series formation began to show a trace of disorder. But in the next moment, a gentle voice came from far away. Lin Yao, I knew you would do this. Luo Wence's voice sounded from behind the L series. He did not appear. But his voice came through some kind of military command device. Using names to interfere with military orders. Very good. This is exactly the control data I need. Lin Yao's eyes were cold. You use living people as data. Luo Wence's voice remained calm. You use living people as register entries. Our methods are merely different. Lin Yao said coldly, Obsidian Village does not erase them. Luo Wence chuckled. But you control them too. You make them report names, report responsibility, and return under your flag. I remove their fear, make them obey military orders, and raise their synchronization. Lin Yao, do not make yourself sound too clean. Those words were like a blade. They were not entirely unreasonable. Obsidian Village was indeed establishing order. Order itself carried restraint. But where was the difference? Lin Yao did not rush to refute him. He looked at the 5 independent players being summoned by the military order, then looked at the L series in the distance. Then he said, Obsidian Village's register can be refused. It can be left. Responsibilities can be amended. Names can be changed. Mistakes can be admitted, and people can still be saved. Your military order only allows execution. Failure means erasure. The Obsidian Flag Shadow Order lit up. The temporary return to register order stabilized. Fang Zhiyan gritted his teeth and began reciting again. Erasure is not a way out. Execution is not a name. Military orders cannot choose for you. Within the distant L series, 2 more people swayed. Luo Wence was silent for 1 second. It seems the first version still has defects. Then let us enter pressure testing. The L series raised their hands at the same time. Gray-black military command light gathered before them. It was not a blade. Not an arrow. It was an order. Marked personnel, return to ranks. Obstructors, exclude. Zhao Tai immediately raised his saber. Break the formation. Liang Ping and Su Feng stood to either side. Shi Shang brought Ma Yuan to protect Zhou Mian and the others. Bai Shi pushed a Luo, Duli, and the other 5 intercepted people backward. Lin Yao knew this battle could not drag on. They had not come to fight a decisive battle against the L-series. They had come to save the second batch and bring intelligence back. He raised the flag Shadow Order and commanded, "Withdraw to Obsidian Village." Zhao Tai froze for a moment, then immediately obeyed. Formation breaking unit, cover the withdrawal. This was not defeat. It was a withdrawal carrying the rescued people out of military command summoning range. The L-series took one step forward. Luo Wence's voice sounded in the night. "Lin Yao, this was only the first call. Next time, they will be more complete." Lin Yao did not look back. He led the 5 intercepted marked people away from the abandoned Saltwell yard. In the distance, the L-series stood neatly in the night. Although the first living Nameless army was not yet complete, it had already shown Obsidian Village that it existed. And on this night, Obsidian Village had also saved the second batch of people before they could be sent underground. Neither side had achieved total victory. But the war had officially escalated. Withdrawing from the abandoned Saltwell yard was harder than entering it. Because now, it was not only the people of Obsidian Village withdrawing. There were also 5 marked people who had just been intercepted before signing the second agreement. Luo, Gao Jun, Du Li, Ma Liang, and Huang Qi. They were not wounded. But they were more unstable than wounded people. Every one of them carried a recall mark left by the first high-risk mission agreement. After Luo Wence's first living military order sounded, those marks were like nails driven into their minds. They were clearly following Obsidian Village north, but their steps kept trying to turn south. Especially Gao Jun. He owed equipment loans, and the deepest mark on his body was debt combat power. Whenever the military command chased them, he subconsciously reached for his weapon and murmured, "Repay the debt, complete the mission, repay the debt." Su Fan grabbed him by the back of the collar. "Gao Jun." Gao Jun's eyes were unfocused. "Repay the debt." Su Fan roared, "Debt is not your name." Gao Jun jolted. I am Gao Jun." "Say it again." "I am Gao Jun." The temporary return to register order lit up a little. Gao Jun finally returned to himself. But it was only temporary. The pursuing military order still echoed from behind. Marked personnel. Return to ranks. Obstructors. Exclude. The voice was not loud, but it seemed pressed directly against the ear. Fang Zhiyan's face was pale. As he walked, he used name-settling recitation to cancel the pursuing order. Luo is not an L candidate. Gao Jun is not debt combat power. Du Li is not a family search inducement sample. Ma Liang is not an escort consumable. Huang Qi is not a gambling debt collateral body. With every round he recited, his throat felt as if it had been scraped with sandpaper. Bai Shi handed him a small bottle of medicine. "Drink a little." Fang Zhiyan drank it. His throat became slightly more comfortable, but his face was still very poor. Zhan walked beside him and said quietly, "Do not force yourself too hard." Fang Zhiyan shook his head. "If I stop, they will be called back." Zhan was silent for a moment. "Then I will take over." Fang Zhiyan looked at him. Zhan took a deep breath and began speaking in his rhythm. "Luo, stay for now. Gao Jun, stay for now. Du Li, stay for now. Ma Liang, stay for now. Huang Qi, stay for now." Zhan's words did not have Fang Zhiyan's language-type synchronization power. But his voice was more like a hand pulling people back from the edge of namelessness. Not precise, but powerful. Fang Zhiyan took the chance to catch his breath. Lin Yao watched the way the two of them worked together, and a new judgment formed in his mind. Fang Zhiyan's name-settling recitation was suited to countering commands. Zhan's nameless soothing was suited to establishing temporary will anchors. One broke orders. One kept people. If they wanted to handle the L series on a large scale in the future, both roles would have to expand. But now was not the time to think about systems. The pursuing order behind them grew closer and closer. It was not that the L series had caught up. Rather, the military order itself was extending along the recall marks. Bai Ji looked at the wrists and necks of the marked people. The marks are deepening. Lin Yao asked, "Can you cut them?" Bai Ji shook her head. "Not without equipment. If I cut them by force, it will harm their identity stability." Zhou Mian suddenly spoke. "The first agreement." Everyone looked at her. Zhou Mian's face was also very pale. The B-03 remnant on her body was being tugged by the military order. Although it was not as serious as a Luo and the others, it still hurt. She gritted her teeth and said, "The mark comes from the first agreement. If the agreement is still on them, the military order can follow it." A Luo hurriedly pulled a thin scroll from his robe. "This?" Gao Jun, Du Li, and the others also each found similar agreements. At first, they had thought these were mission vouchers. They had not expected them to be anchors for the recall marks. Lin Yao immediately had everyone stop behind a broken stone. Zhao Tai brought Liang Ping to keep watch. Shi Shang and Ma Yuan went to the rear to confirm the L series distance. Lin Yao spread out the 5 first agreements. On the surface, the agreements looked normal. Mission name. Advance payment. Gathering location. Confidentiality clause. But under the light of the Obsidian Flag Shadow Order, dark gray small print surfaced at the bottom of the agreements. If the mission phase activates, the signer must respond to recall. If the signer refuses, it will be regarded as breach of contract. Those in breach may be forcibly brought back to complete procedural correction. Zhao Tai cursed angrily, "Were these words written for insects?" Su Feng frowned. "They are smaller than the wooden tags on grain sacks." Lin Yao opened the contamination responsibility register. Hidden recall clause. A military command recall mark was buried under the name of a mission voucher. Not clearly disclosed. Ruling, invalid. Light from the responsibility register fell. The 5 agreements trembled at the same time. But they did not immediately break apart. Because they were already bound to the 5 people's signatures. If the agreements were directly broken, the backlash might hit the 5 people. Fang Zhiyan looked at the agreements and suddenly said, "They have to withdraw consent themselves." Lin Yao asked, "How?" Fang Zhiyan thought for a moment. "Say the withdrawal. Not that you adjudicate it away. They themselves must withdraw the consent that was given under hidden terms." That was the key. Luo Wence and He Jin's agreement system had always used voluntary as its core. Then to sever the first agreement, they could not simply burn it from the outside. The parties themselves had to withdraw after being informed. Lin Yao immediately said, "Listen carefully. There is a hidden recall clause in the agreement. You were not fully informed before. Now you may choose to withdraw this consent." The 5 looked at one another. Gao Jun was the first to speak. "Will withdrawing work?" Lin Yao answered, "It may not cut it completely. But if you do not withdraw, the pursuing order will keep following you." Du Li asked in a low voice, "After I withdraw, can I still look for my brother?" Zhou Mian looked at her. "If you go in, you may not find your brother. But it is very likely you will lose yourself too." Du Li's eyes reddened. She gripped the agreement and finally said, "I withdraw." The agreement flashed. Fang Zhiyan immediately followed. duly withdraws the consent given under the hidden recall clause. Zhan added, duly stays first to find her brother. She does not return to ranks. The recall mark on Duli's body faded a little. It worked. Gao Jun gritted his teeth. I withdraw. A Luo followed. I withdraw. Ma Liang and Huang Qi hesitated for a while, then also withdrew one by one. Lin Yao recorded them in the responsibility register. A Luo withdraws the consent given under the hidden recall clause. Gao Jun withdraws the consent given under the hidden recall clause. Duly withdraws the consent given under the hidden recall clause. Ma Liang withdraws the consent given under the hidden recall clause. Huang Qi withdraws the consent given under the hidden recall clause. The hidden recall words on the 5 agreements began to burn. The entire agreements were not burned away. Instead, the hidden clauses were drawn out. Gray-black flames burned those few lines of small print. The 5 groaned in pain at the same time. The recall marks on their bodies faded by more than half. The pursuing military order in the distance also seemed to suddenly lose its targets and became blurred. System prompts surfaced. Hidden recall clauses withdrawn. Recall marks on 5 marked personnel weakened. Name-settling reciter Fang Zhiyan has obtained a new command phrase, informed withdrawal. Nameless soother Zhan has obtained a new anchor, stay for now. Fang Zhiyan staggered. Zhan supported him. This time, it had not been passive defense. It was the first time they had used withdrawal of consent to counter Luo Wence's agreement system. Lin Yao collected the remnants of the 5 agreements. Move. The team withdrew again. The pursuing order had already weakened greatly. But when they were about to approach the outskirts of Obsidian Village, Shang suddenly caught up from behind. The L series is not pursuing. Zhao Tai frowned. Not pursuing? Shang nodded. They stopped outside the abandoned saltwell yard. As if they are waiting for something. Lin Yao looked south. It was not that Luo Wence could not pursue them. He was deliberately not pursuing. He had already obtained the data he wanted. How Obsidian Village weakened recall marks. How Fang Zhiyan countered command phrases. How Zhan established will anchors. How the 5 marked people withdrew consent. He had seen all of it. In this withdrawal, Obsidian Village had saved people. But Luo Wence had also completed a pressure test. Lin Yao knew very clearly. Next time, the L series would be harder to deal with.